The morning I found out, I was standing in my kitchen making coffee. That's the thing nobody tells you about moments that change your life. They don't announce themselves. There's no dramatic music, no warning. 1 minute you're watching the coffee drip into the pot, thinking about whether you need to mow the lawn before the rain comes in, and the next minute your phone rings and the world you thought you understood tilts sideways and doesn't quite come back. It was my daughter Vivienne. She didn't say hello. She said, "Dad, I need you to know something before you find out another way." I set down my mug, something in her voice. Not panic exactly, more like the careful steadiness of someone who has rehearsed what they're about to say. "Okay," I said. "Warren and I are getting married next month, and I need you to know that we've already handled everything. You don't need to worry about a thing." I didn't understand yet. I thought she was telling me good news. I thought handled everything meant they'd booked a venue, hired a caterer, sent out invitations. I was 64 years old, retired from 31 years as a structural engineer, and I still thought my daughter was calling to share happy news. "That's wonderful," I said, and I meant it. Then she told me the rest. Let me back up. My wife Patricia passed away 6 years ago. Pancreatic cancer, the kind that moves fast and doesn't give you much time to negotiate. We had 37 years together, raised 2 kids, Vivienne and her older brother Clifton, in a 4-bedroom house in Raleigh, North Carolina that Patricia and I had paid off by the time we were both 52. We were proud of that. We'd scrimped and saved and refinanced once during the 2008 crash, and then clawed our way back up. That house was ours, paid in full, no strings. After Patricia died, Clifton moved his family out to Portland. We talk on the phone, text back and forth, see each other at Christmas. He's a good man. His wife Teresa is warm and practical, and they have 2 kids who call me Grandpa Roy, which still makes me smile every single time. Vivienne stayed close. She'd moved back to Raleigh after grad school, got a job in marketing, had an apartment about 15 minutes from my house. We had Sunday dinners most weeks. She'd come over, I'd make something Patricia used to love, pot roast, or that lemon chicken with the rosemary, and we'd eat together and talk, and it felt like holding on to something precious, like keeping a candle lit in an empty room. I loved those Sundays. I still do. About 2 years ago, Vivienne started bringing Warren. Warren Shell was 40 years old, divorced once, no kids. He worked in commercial real estate. He had very white teeth and a firm handshake and a habit of talking about his investment portfolio within the first 20 minutes of any conversation. I didn't dislike him immediately. That's important to say. I gave him a fair shot because Vivienne was happy, and Vivienne being happy mattered more to me than my own comfort. But there were things, small things at first. He'd make suggestions about my house. "Have you thought about updating the kitchen, Roy? That would add serious resale value." He called me Roy from the first Sunday, even though I'd introduced myself as Russell. I didn't correct him for 2 months because I didn't want to make things awkward. That was my first mistake. My wife Patricia would have corrected him immediately, laughing, and it would have been fine. I let it slide, and then it became the thing we did, and I never figured out how to undo it without making it a whole production. The suggestions about my house continued. He had opinions about the landscaping, the gutters, the fact that I still had a landline. Once, he walked through my study while I was showing Vivienne something, and said, almost to himself, "You know, this space could be a really productive short-term rental." I was standing 3 feet away. I told Vivienne about it afterward, gently, trying not to make it into a conflict. She said I was reading into things, that Warren had grown up in a family that talked about real estate the way other families talked about sports. It was just his frame of reference. He didn't mean anything by it. I believed her because I wanted to. That was my second mistake. About 8 months before the phone call, Vivienne came to me with a request. Warren's commercial real estate firm had run into some cash flow issues. Something about a deal in Charlotte that had gotten complicated. A delay with investors, nothing permanent. Just a timing problem. They needed a short-term bridge loan, $60,000, to cover operating expenses while the deal sorted itself out. She asked if I would co-sign. I said no. I was kind about it, but I was firm. I'd been an engineer for 3 decades. I understood load-bearing structures. I understood what happens when you put too much weight on something that isn't built for it. I told Vivienne that I loved her and that I would do almost anything for her, but that mixing family and business loans was the kind of thing that could permanently damage a relationship, and I wasn't willing to risk what we had. She was disappointed. I could see it. But she nodded and said she understood, and the Sunday dinners continued. What I didn't know, what I had no way of knowing, was that somewhere in those months a plan was being made. Here is what Vivienne told me on the phone that morning. About 14 months earlier, I had signed a document. I remembered signing it. It was a healthcare proxy update, adding Vivienne as my primary medical decision-maker after Patricia's death had left that paperwork outdated. We'd sat at my kitchen table. She'd had a stack of papers. I'd signed where she pointed. What I did not know, what I had not read carefully enough, because she was my daughter and I trusted her, was that in that stack of papers was a durable financial power of attorney. Not limited, durable, meaning it gave her broad authority to act on my behalf in financial matters. I had signed it. My signature was on it. Notarized. She had used it. In the 3 months leading up to that phone call, Vivienne, acting under that power of attorney, had liquidated a $112,000 from my brokerage account, a non-retirement account I'd built over 20 years of careful investing. She had also, through a title company in Raleigh that Warren had a professional relationship with, signed a deed of trust that put my house up as collateral on a loan. The $112,000 had gone toward Warren's wedding, the custom venue they'd booked, a renovated estate outside Asheville, the catering, the photography, the honeymoon in the Maldives, the dress. My house was now collateral on a $175,000 loan in Warren Shell's business name, with my property as the securing asset. She was calling to tell me because Warren thought it was cleaner if I knew before I accidentally discovered it. I stood in my kitchen, holding the phone. The coffee finished brewing and the machine beeped softly and the sound felt very far away. "Vivienne," I said, "I need you to hear me say this clearly. What you have just described is a crime." She started crying. She said she knew. She was so sorry she'd been scared to tell me. She'd been trying to find a way to fix it before I found out. Warren had said it would all be paid back before I even noticed. The Charlotte deal was almost closed. "Stop," I said. "And here is the thing about being 64 years old and having lost your wife and raised your children and spent your whole career calculating whether structures can hold what you put on them. You learn what to say and what not to say. You learn that the moment you're in right now is not the moment for the conversation you actually need to have. You learn to slow down." "I hear you," I said. "I'm going to hang up now. Don't contact me until I contact you." She started to say something else. I hung up. Then I sat down at my kitchen table, in the same chair where I had apparently signed away my financial freedom, and I did not move for a long time. The first call I made was to my attorney, a man named Douglas Fenter, whom I had hired years ago when Patricia and I updated our wills. He was thorough and calm, and the kind of lawyer who asked twice as many questions as he answered. I told him everything, slowly and in order, the way I'd learned to present structural reports. Facts first, speculation clearly labeled. He was quiet for a moment. Then he said, "Russell, I need you to do 3 things right now. Don't touch your phone records. Don't respond to any communication from your daughter or her fiancé. And first thing tomorrow morning, come to my office with every financial statement you have access to." I did exactly that. What followed was the kind of month that ages you, and also, paradoxically, clarifies you. You find out what you're made of when someone you love turns out to have done something unforgivable. I'm not saying Vivienne is an evil person. I've never believed that. I believe she's a person who made catastrophically bad choices under the influence of someone who was very good at making bad things seem reasonable. Warren, it turned out, had done this before. Not exactly this, but variations. His first marriage had ended when his ex-wife discovered he'd taken out a home equity line of credit without fully disclosing it to her. He'd had his real estate license suspended in South Carolina for 2 years over a transaction that a client claimed was fraudulent. He was charming and confident, and he understood exactly how to frame a thing so it sounded like logic. Douglas found all of this through a combination of public records and a private investigator, whose bill I paid without blinking. The power of attorney was the central issue, and it was also, as it turned out, our central advantage. Under North Carolina law, a durable power of attorney grants broad authority, but it does not grant unlimited authority. There are specific categories of transaction that require explicit authorization in the document, and the liquidation of investment accounts for purposes unrelated to the principal's benefit, and certainly the pledging of property as collateral for a third party's business debt, both fell outside what was properly authorized. More importantly, Douglas had a colleague, a forensic document examiner, who looked at the power of attorney I had supposedly signed and found anomalies. The notarization was dated a Saturday. The notary whose stamp appeared on the document had, when contacted, no record of the appointment. Her log, which she kept meticulously, showed no appointment that day. Vivienne had not gotten me to sign a legitimate power of attorney. She had gotten me to sign something, probably the healthcare proxy update she'd described. And then the power of attorney had been assembled around my signature page. The notarization was fabricated. This changed everything from a civil matter to a criminal one. I want to be honest about what I felt during this period, because I think the honest version is more true to what it's actually like than any cleaner narrative. I was not calm. Not inside. I was terrified and heartbroken and furious, and then terrified again, cycling through those feelings at odd hours, lying awake at 3 a.m, staring at the ceiling of the bedroom Patricia and I had shared for 31 years. I thought about Sunday dinners. I thought about driving Vivienne to school in the rain when her car wouldn't start. I thought about the summer she was 11, and we all drove to the Outer Banks, and she got stung by a jellyfish and cried for an hour, and then wanted to go back in the water. I thought about the fact that I had held her face in my hands in the delivery room and understood for the first time what the word precious really meant. None of that made what she'd done less real. But it mattered. It mattered that I held all of it at once, the love and the grief and the legal reality, without letting any one of them erase the others. That's not easy. I don't think I did it perfectly. But I tried. The wedding was 14 days away when Douglas filed the injunction. The injunction froze the title company's ability to enforce the deed of trust and notified the relevant financial institutions that the power of attorney under which the brokerage transactions had been executed was under dispute and potentially fraudulent. Warren's loan, which had been structured around my property as collateral, collapsed. The lender pulled out. The Charlotte deal, whatever was left of it, fell apart as well. I learned later from Douglas that Warren had been using my assets as leverage to convince the lender that he was a more creditworthy borrower than he actually was. Without my house backing the loan, the whole structure had nothing to hold it up. The wedding venue, which had been paid largely with my liquidated investment funds, had a contract clause that allowed for forfeit of the deposit in cases of financial dispute. They lost most of it. Vivienne called me 17 times in 4 days. I did not answer. She showed up at my door on a Wednesday afternoon. I opened it because I am her father and I will always open the door. She looked like she hadn't slept. She was wearing a sweatshirt I recognized from her college years, and her hair was pulled back, and without whatever she usually wore to Sunday dinners, she looked very young and also very old at the same time. "Dad," she said. "Come in," I said. She sat at the kitchen table and I sat across from her, and we looked at each other for a moment. "Is Warren with you?" I asked. "No," she said. We're not," she stopped. Started again. "He left. When the injunction hit, he left. He said I'd created a legal mess he couldn't be associated with." I let that sit in the air between us. "He told me it was fine," she said, and her voice broke on the last word. "He said it was a gray area, that the power of attorney was legitimate, that you'd meant to give me that authority, that it was just a short-term thing. He made it sound so reasonable. I know that's not an excuse." "I know that. It isn't an excuse," I said. "I know. Do you understand what you actually did? What the document examiner found?" She looked at the table. "He handled the notarization. I didn't ask how. There it was. I don't know if she believed Warren had forged it himself or had paid someone, but she had not asked. She had chosen not to ask. "I have a question," I said, "and I want you to answer it honestly, even if you think the answer will make me angry." She looked up. "Did any part of you know? Not the specifics, not the notarization, But did any part of you know that what you were doing wasn't something I'd have agreed to if you'd asked me directly? She was quiet for a long time. Long enough that I almost answered for her. Yes, she said, barely audible. Yes, I did. I nodded. Okay, I said. Then here is what's going to happen. Douglas is going to continue the legal process. You will cooperate fully with every request he makes. You will not obstruct. You will not stall. You will not discuss any of this with anyone Warren may have in common with you. You will provide a full accounting of every dollar and how it was spent. And then, I looked at my daughter, who I had loved every day of her life without conditions or reservations, and I thought about what it means to love someone and still require them to face what they've done. And then we'll see, I said. That's the most honest answer I have. The legal process took 7 months. The brokerage account recovered $89,000 through a combination of the firm's insurance process and a civil judgment against Warren Shell, who was also facing a separate criminal investigation by the time everything unfolded. My house was never actually in jeopardy once the injunction was in place. The deed of trust was ruled unenforceable because the power of attorney itself was fraudulent. Warren pled guilty to 1 count of financial fraud and received a suspended sentence, 2 years probation, and was ordered to make restitution. He also surrendered his real estate license permanently. Vivienne was not criminally charged. The prosecution declined to pursue charges against her because her cooperation had been extensive, and because Douglas had been very clear about documenting from the beginning that she had been manipulated by someone with a prior pattern of this behavior. She did, however, have to appear before a civil court and provide testimony that was part of the record against Warren. She kept her word. She cooperated with everything. My son Clifton flew in from Portland when everything was resolved. We sat on my back porch on a warm October evening with 2 glasses of bourbon that had been in my cabinet since before Patricia died, and he asked me how I was actually doing. I'm okay, I said. And then, because Clifton is the kind of person who deserves a more honest answer than that, I'm not all the way okay, but I'm okay enough. Are you going to forgive her? I thought about that for a while. The yard was full of the sounds that yards make at dusk. Crickets, a neighbor's dog somewhere, the last birds of the day. I already forgave her, I said. Forgiveness isn't the same as trust, and it isn't the same as pretending it didn't happen. Clifton nodded slowly. He didn't say anything for a minute, which is something I've always loved about him. He knows when to let a thing breathe. Patricia would have handled this differently, he said. Not an accusation, more like a wondering. She would have, I said. She would have cried. She would have been loud about it, and then she would have sat exactly where you're sitting, and she would have said something that made the whole thing make sense. I took a drink. She always had that. I never figured out where she got it. We sat there for a while longer, until the dark came in and we had to go inside. What I want to say, and I've thought about how to say this for a long time, is that the thing I almost lost wasn't money. I mean, yes, money. $112,000 is not nothing, and losing my house as a retirement asset would have been devastating. Those things matter. But what I almost lost was the ability to trust my own judgment, the ability to look at my own life and recognize it, the ability to be a father. Because here is the truth. If I had handled that morning differently, if I had said things I couldn't take back, made accusations I couldn't support yet, burned every bridge in a moment of rage, I would have lost Vivienne completely. And whatever she did, she is still my daughter. She is still the 11-year-old who wanted to go back in the water after the jellyfish. She is still a person I love. Slow down. That's the thing. When everything is on fire, slow down. Take the time to understand what's actually happening before you decide what to do about it. Get your documentation in order. Call your attorney before you call your daughter back. Know what the law actually says before you tell someone what you're going to do. The house is still mine. The brokerage account has rebuilt itself over 2 years to within 80% of where it was. Not all the way back, but closer than I expected. I have a new estate attorney now, separate from Douglas, who has gone through every document in my files and replaced anything that had Vivienne's name on it with properly witnessed and clearly authorized versions. Vivienne and I see each other. Not Sunday dinners yet. That's not where we are. But coffee, sometimes, On a Tuesday morning, we talk. There are long pauses sometimes that didn't used to be there, and I don't know if those ever go away completely. I think we're both learning what the new version of this relationship looks like. She asked me once, about 4 months after it was all over, if I hated her. I told her no. She said, "I don't know how you don't." I said, "Because hating you would require me to stop loving you, and I don't know how to do that." Believe me, it would have been simpler. She laughed a little. It was the first time I'd heard her laugh since before all of this started. It didn't sound exactly like it used to, but it was still her laugh. I know there are people listening to this who are in the middle of something right now. Some of you have children who've taken something from you: money, dignity, a piece of your peace. Some of you have been made to feel like you were invisible, like everything you built over a lifetime was just a resource someone else had a right to. I want to tell you something, and I mean it with everything I have. What you built is yours. What you earned is yours. What you sacrificed for is yours, and nobody, not a child, not a spouse, not a person with a charming smile and a confident handshake, has the right to take it from you without your genuine, informed, freely given consent. Protect yourself. That's not a cold thing. That's not being a bad parent or a suspicious person. That's having enough self-respect to know that you worked too hard, and loved too much, and gave too much of yourself, to let it disappear because you trusted someone who wasn't worthy of that trust. Make a will. Keep your financial accounts in your own name until there is a legal and documented reason to do otherwise. If someone you love ever asks you to sign something, read it yourself. All of it, before you pick up the pen. If you don't understand it, pay $100 to sit with a lawyer for an hour. It will be the best $100 you ever spent. I know this because I am the man who stood in his kitchen, watching the coffee drip, and didn't know yet that his world had already changed. And I am still standing. Still in this house. Still in this kitchen, if I'm being honest, with the same coffee maker I've had for 9 years that Patricia picked out because it had a thermal carafe, and the coffee stayed hot for hours. The coffee still stays hot. That's something.